All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, Pakistan's on the agenda. We're looking at an essay by Ashraf Jehangir Qazi.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he's a former Pakistani ambassador, so
Yeah.
kind of in the know,
Right, right.
And his take on things, well, it's pretty intense. By the end of this, you'll see why he thinks Pakistan's this, crossroads. Could go either way.
Yeah, I've heard some buzz about this essay. What makes Qazi's perspective unique, would you say?
He doesn't just list out the problems. It's more like he's describing this whole new Pakistan emerging, what he calls the Third Republic.
Third Republic. Okay, so to get that, we probably need some context, right? Like, what led up to this point?
Exactly. So, rewind a bit.
Okay.
Qazi calls the night of October 2021, 2024, Pakistan's blackest day.
Wow.
He even compares it to, get this, the fall of Dhaka in 1971. Intense, right?
Yeah, that's a heavy comparison. What exactly happened on that night?
It's when they passed the 26th Amendment to the Pakistani Constitution.
Ugh, amendments. Sounds a bit dry, but I'm guessing this one wasn't.
Oh, no, this was huge. Totally reshaped the power dynamics in the country.
How so?
Well, think of it like a scale.
Okay.
One side, you got the civilian government. Other side, the military. This amendment, it basically piled a ton of weight on the military side.
So it shifted the balance in favor of the military.
Big time. Even the International Commission of Jurists, they were like, whoa, this is undermining judicial independence.
So Qazi sees this amendment as part of a larger trend then?
Yeah, he talks about the military's been getting more and more powerful since 1979.
1979, why that year specifically?
That's when Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, he was the prime minister, got executed after a military coup.
Oh, right.
Qazi says that was a major turning point. It paved the way for the military to basically grab more and more control.
It's ironic, isn't it? The military, they weren't even involved in Pakistan's founding, and they actually played a part in the country splitting in 71.
Right, when East Pakistan became Bangladesh.
Yet, they've become this dominant force.
And according to Qazi, it's been pretty devastating.
In what way?
He says this obsession with being a security state, it's come at a huge cost to the people. They're so focused on security that they've ignored basic stuff. Education, healthcare, dealing with poverty.
So the people are suffering while the military thrives.
Exactly. He describes this stark contrast. You get the elite living it up in huge mansions.
Right.
And then the average Pakistani struggling just to make ends meet.
And anyone who speaks out against this, what happens to them?
Qazi uses this term, managed dissent.
Managed dissent. Interesting.
People are allowed to voice opinions, but only within certain limits.
But no real challenge to those in power.
Exactly. And Qazi, he connects this to Noam Chomsky's work on the responsibility of intellectuals.
Oh, right.
He's basically saying those with power, the intellectuals, they have a moral duty to speak up, to challenge the status quo.
It's like he's asking, if they won't speak, who will? And this is where Imran Khan comes in.
Exactly. Qazi sees Khan as this, beacon of hope. He's not saying Khan's perfect.
Right.
But he says all these attacks on Khan, they've just made him more popular.
So what is it about Khan that makes him the guy, the one who represents what everyday Pakistanis want?
It's a lot of things, really. He's seen as someone who gets the people's struggles. Qazi points to those huge rallies Khan held.
Oh, yeah. Those were massive.
People flooded the streets to support him, even during the SKO summit when the government was cracking down. Wow. It's like he tapped into this deep well of discontent that the establishment had been ignoring.
So Qazi sees this as a pivotal moment for Pakistan, then?
Yeah, he's saying they have a choice. Keep going down the same road or fight for a different kind of future, a more democratic just future.
And he thinks Khan's the one to lead that fight.
That's how he sees it. But, and this is important, he also warns about the potential dangers.
Oh.
He's basically saying, look, the military, the elite, they're not going to give up power easily. And he uses this term, the miltablishment, to describe them.
Miltablishment.
It's like this network of the military and the economic elite all tangled up together. And Qazi's worried about how they'll react when their power is truly threatened.
So it sounds like Qazi's dropping a hint here. This miltablishment, they've got a lot to lose. And when people in power feel threatened, things can get messy.
Exactly. And that's why understanding this whole Third Republic idea is so important. It's not just about a change in leadership. It's about a potential, seismic shift in the very fabric of Pakistan.
Okay, you've definitely got my attention with this Third Republic thing. Okay, so walk me through it. What were the first two republics?
Right. So Qazi sees Pakistan's history in these distinct phases, right?
Yeah.
He calls the period from like 1948 when Pakistan was born, until that split with East Pakistan in 71. That's the First Republic.
Okay, makes sense. And then the Second Republic would be?
That's from 71, after Bangladesh becomes its own thing, all the way up to that night Qazi keeps referring to, October 2021, 2024, when that 26th Amendment happened.
So the one that tipped the scales toward the military?
It's exactly.
Okay, but now we're supposedly in this Third Republic. Like right now, what makes it so different from the previous two?
That's the key question, isn't it? Qazi's argument is that we're on the verge of it, like teetering on the edge. And what he sees driving this new era is this surge in political awareness, especially among, like, young people, the poor, women.
They're waking up to the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and he points to countries like Bangladesh, which, used to be part of Pakistan. They're seeing progress there and wondering why Pakistan's lagging behind.
It's like that realization, hey, wait a minute, we deserve better than this.
Exactly. And that's what makes this moment so, like, volatile, right?
Yeah.
Because this awakening, this demand for change, it's a direct threat to the militablishment.
The military and the elite who've been calling the shots for so long.
Right. And Qazi doesn't hold back, like, at all in describing how they've been running things.
How so?
He talks about corruption, this whole system of, like, extracting wealth from the country, using national security as an excuse to protect their own interests. And on top of that, he even says social media is exposing all of this. You can't hide it anymore.
So it's like all this stuff is coming to a head, right?
It's like a perfect storm brewing. You've got the corruption, the inequality, the military's grip on power, and then you add in things like climate change and overpopulation. It's a lot for any country to handle.
Wow. Yeah.
And Qazi argues that, like, all of this combined, it's created a level of discontent that even the militablishment can't control anymore. They can't keep silencing everyone. Can't just pretend everything's fine.
So a reckoning is coming.
That's what he's suggesting.
Yeah.
And that's where Imran Khan fits in.
So Khan is the face of this Third Republic, the symbol of this fight for a different Pakistan.
That's Qazi's argument. He might not be a perfect leader, but he's become this, like, focal point for the hopes and aspirations of those who are fed up with the status quo.
And the more the militablishment tries to, like, sideline him, the more powerful he becomes, right?
Exactly. It's almost like they're turning him into a martyr. Those massive rallies, the empty streets during the SKO summit when everyone was supposed to be celebrating, that wasn't an accident.
Yeah, people were making a statement.
Exactly. And that brings us back to, like, Qazi's warning about how the militablishment might react to all of this. Remember, they have a lot to lose, and they don't exactly have a reputation for being, peaceful when it comes to giving up power.
Yeah, that's not a good sign.
So it's not just about Khan. It's about what happens when a system that's been rigged for so long starts to crumble.
Okay, so things sound pretty tense, but what's the solution here? Does Qazi just leave us with this gloomy picture, or is there some hope?
He does offer a path forward, but it's it's a pretty radical one.
Yeah.
He calls for what he calls a justice and reconciliation process.
Justice and reconciliation, huh? What would that look like in this context?
He's talking about those who've been responsible for Pakistan's problems, like actually owning up to their actions, returning stolen wealth. And in exchange, they would avoid punishment. It's a way to try to move forward without, further violence or chaos.
So he's saying the people who've been, like, exploiting the country for their own gain should just admit they were wrong, give back everything they took, and everyone's just supposed to forgive and forget.
It sounds idealistic, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
But Qazi's argument is that this might be the only way to actually break this cycle of corruption and abuse of power. He's appealing to their conscience, their sense of patriotism. It's a long shot, but he's saying it's worth a try.
I mean, it's definitely an interesting idea, but do you really think the militablishment would go for something like this? Like, would they actually be willing to give up that much power?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Qazi acknowledges that it would be a huge challenge, even if they were to agree to it in the first place. He's not naive about how difficult this would be, especially with stuff like climate change adding to the complexity.
Yeah, no kidding.
But his point is that rebuilding Pakistan, like truly creating a future that's just and equitable, it can only happen if those who've been holding the country back step aside and, like, let the people take charge.
Makes you think about all the Pakistanis living abroad, right? The diaspora. Do they have a role to play in all of this?
Qazi actually addresses that directly.
Yeah.
He makes a plea to the diaspora, especially those in the US and the UK. He's urging them to, like, use their influence to pressure their governments to support democratic values in Pakistan. He even suggests things like personal sanctions against members of the militablishment.
So he's advocating for international pressure to bring about change.
Yeah, it's like he's acknowledging that internal forces alone might not be enough to break the current system. He needs outside help.
Interesting. It definitely adds another layer to this whole thing. But let's bring it back to Imran Khan for a sec. If this Third Republic thing is actually going to happen, what does Qazi see as Khan's role? Like, is he supposed to be the president, the prime minister, what?
It's funny, Qazi doesn't get into specifics about what position Khan would hold. He's more focused on the kind of leadership Khan represents, you know, the values he embodies.
Okay, so it's more about the kind of leader he is rather than a specific title.
Yeah, and he recognizes that Khan's time as prime minister wasn't perfect. But he argues that those experiences, even the negative ones, they've shaped him, prepared him for something bigger.
So it's not necessarily about Khan being the perfect leader. It's more about him being a symbol of change, a break from the old way of doing things.
Exactly. Qazi emphasizes that Khan's strength comes from that connection with the people, his willingness to stand up to the militablishment, to inspire hope. He even suggests that if Khan were to, fall, it might actually solidify his position as a martyr, which could further fuel the movement for change.
That's a powerful thought.
It is. But he doesn't stop there. Qazi actually gives Khan some advice, assuming he does manage to regain influence.
Oh.
He stresses how important it is for Khan to, surround himself with a really capable and trustworthy team. Learn from your past mistakes, choose your allies carefully. He also emphasizes the need for humility and wisdom, recognizing that the challenges ahead are enormous.
So it's not enough to just be a symbol. He has to be a smart, strategic leader.
Right. And he goes even further, suggesting that Khan should focus on, cultivating a new generation of leaders. He even mentions people like Manzoor Pashtun and Marang Balak. They represent those emerging voices from different regions and communities in Pakistan.
So he's calling for a more inclusive style of leadership, one that reflects the diversity of the country.
Yeah, it's almost like he's saying, Khan, you can't do this alone. You need to build a movement that's bigger than just yourself.
Wow, that's a pretty bold vision.
It is. And it definitely raises the stakes for Imran Khan and the future of Pakistan.
And it makes you think about the bigger picture too, right? I mean, what does this all mean for democracy, not just in Pakistan, but for the whole region? Like, if this movement succeeds, could it inspire similar movements in other countries that are grappling with the same kinds of challenges?
It's a great question.
And on the flip side, if it fails, what does that say about the power of entrenched elites to, resist change? Makes you wonder, what if this whole movement in Pakistan, the one with Imran Khan at the forefront, what if they actually pull it off, actually dismantle this militablishment that Qazi keeps talking about?
It would be huge.
It'd send a shockwave through the whole region. Hey, even the most entrenched power structures, they're not untouchable.
Qazi's kind of throwing down the gauntlet, isn't he? To anyone listening who's rolling their eyes at all this?
Right. If you think change in Pakistan is a pipe dream, if you think Khan's just a flash in the pan?
But what does that say about how you see the country's future?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's making us confront our own cynicism.
Makes you think, are we so jaded that we can't even picture a different Pakistan? One where it's not all about the elite and the military calling the shots? A Pakistan where the people actually have a say?
That's a big question. And this isn't just a Pakistan thing, right? This whole power struggle, the people versus the entrenched elites, we're seeing it everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Think about what Qazi's describing. The corruption, the inequality, the military's grip on everything. This isn't unique to Pakistan.
Not at all.
So the question becomes, if change is possible in a place like Pakistan where the odds seem so stacked against it, what could that mean for other countries fighting similar battles?
Could it spark a whole wave of democratic movements? I mean, that'd be something.
Right. And on the flip side, if this movement in Pakistan fizzles out, what does that say about democracy globally? About whether the people can actually wrest power back from those who've had it for so long?
Pretty high stakes, huh?
No kidding. And I think that's why this whole deep dive into Qazi's essay, it's so relevant. He's not just talking about Pakistan in a vacuum. He's making us think about the bigger picture, the global ripple effects of what's happening there.
And that ending of his essay. So powerful. He asks if that night, October 2021, 2024, the one he keeps calling the Black Night, could actually be the start of something new for Pakistan.
It's poetic, almost.
It is. And it leaves us with this big question mark hanging over everything. Will this be Pakistan's turning point, the moment they break free from the past and actually build something new? Or will they just get dragged back down by the same forces that have held them back for so long?
It's the question, isn't it?
That's what we've been trying to do with this deep dive, not just regurgitate Qazi's essay, but really get people thinking, what's at stake here? Not just for Pakistan, but for all of us.
Because this fight for democracy, for fairness, for a world where things are a little more even, that's a fight that goes beyond borders. What happens in Pakistan, it matters, whether you're Pakistani or not. If you believe in a world where power is actually accountable to the people, then this matters.
We've just scratched the surface here, but hopefully this deep dive has, I don't know, piqued your interest a bit, given you some food for thought.
It's definitely a lot to unpack.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, seek out different perspectives, have those tough conversations. The future of Pakistan, heck, maybe even the world, could depend on it.